Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the JKMRC Friday seminar. Today we have Rick Valenta from the SMI. Many of you will know Rick. He's got over 30 years of experience in the exploration industry, ranging from project management to consultancy and research. Rick started with his PhD at George Fisher through Monash University, and then he worked extensively in the Mount Isa region for MIM. Rick has been working in a range of consultancies, specialising in exploration and project management and project generation. And he joined the SMI in 2017 as the director of the Bryan Research Centre. Rick is the leader of the Complex Orebodies Program, which is a cross-cutting research program at the SMI. And today, Rick is going to give us an introduction and an overview and an update of the work that's going on in that project. Okay, so Rick, over to you.
Thanks, Nathan. I'm just going to share my screen here. What's going on here? All right. Can you see that?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I don't know why my picture isn't coming up in the corner, but that's all right. I've seen myself before. I guess the first thing I wanted to say was there's one thing I wanted to correct in Nathan's introduction where he said I've been working for a long period in consultancies. Actually, I spent very little time as a consultant and actually spent most of my time after leaving academia in either MIM for 8 years or so, and the rest of the time in junior to mid-size mining companies, either in COO or CEO roles, putting projects into production. And the reason I wanted to mention that is that is kind of relevant to the Complex Orebodies Program, in the sense that the reason I wasn't that great as a single operator consultant is that I far prefer working in teams and working with a larger number of people, and really enjoy those interactions. And the Complex Orebodies Program's been a great opportunity to do that. Okay, and the other thing to say is that I guess originally we were thinking that everybody would be traveling on school holidays, so we hadn't scheduled a seminar for this week, but given that nobody's traveling on school holidays, we thought we should have a webinar. So really, the decision to give this update, which I'm very happy to be able to do, was taken on Tuesday. So let's just say that the preparation for the presentation hasn't been as complete as one might have done otherwise. But what we can see there on the screen, or hopefully you can see on the screen, are the four things I want to talk about. Which is just a little bit on future mineral supply, because that's really the central aim and objective of the Complex Orebodies Program, is to carry out research that facilitates the availability of future mineral supply. And then I'll talk briefly about some of the supply challenges, and then spend most of my time talking about the research that we're carrying out in the Complex Orebodies Program, and then just finish up with a little bit of a summary of some, I guess, measures of the achievements and impact of the program to date. So we'll start with the future mineral supply. So the first thing to say is that, and anybody who's listened to any of my Complex Orebodies presentations before will recognize this, and that is that when you look at most commodities, because of increases in population and because of continued industrialization and the need to build a new generation of electric vehicles and decarbonize the economy, all those reasons, almost all of the major commodities are growing in demand, and are projected to grow in demand into the future. And I know that there are some people out there who think, oh well, if only we could turn off the tap and move to a lower supply scenario, and we'd be far more responsible on this planet. But The reason, and that's the reason I put up these sustainable development goals, because there are a number of sustainable development goals that relate to development of the people outside the billion of us or so who are very well off and have all the metals we need, thank you very much. There's another 6 billion or so who actually are going to need more metals, you know, if they want to approach our standard of living. So there's a whole series of sustainable development goals, and I'm not going to go through them here, but that speak to poverty eradication, global economic growth, improvements in infrastructure, and reduction in inequality, that make this not a game of greed for Western countries, but future mineral supply being vitally important for the entire world. And the future mineral supply basically has to come from known ore bodies, and I would have shown this example last time I gave this presentation. It's from Richard Shoddy showing copper, and a lot of people like to think about copper and just showing in blue the growth in copper consumption, which is up to about 725 million tons as of mid 2019, and the growth in total copper resources up to about 3,500 million tons, which, you know, when you look at that on its face value, you'd say, well, that looks pretty good. Looks like we got plenty of copper to be going on with. And what we see in the red here are values that relate to estimated reserves, USGS estimated reserves, which are much smaller. They relate to copper that we can actually access, that we can, I guess, securely access already. And that gap really represents resources that may exist, but the extent to which they're accessible to us is a subject of debate. And then if we look at future demand scenarios, what we can see is that there's but for a lot of this is from an Elshkaki et al. Paper, the Yale group. For most of the commodities, there's a window where that runs anywhere from the late 2020s out to 2050 or beyond, where our reasonably understood resources start to run out. So again, it just highlights the gap between what our future demand is going to be and what our potential supply is. And I guess there are people who then say, well, of course we're going to make new discoveries, and what I guess this graph shows, and it's another Richard Shoddy graph, what it's basically showing is exploration expenditure. These the red line, and then the bars show discoveries. And I think I said this in May last year when I gave this talk last, that as of a couple of years ago, mineral exploration transitioned into being, or really over the last decade is what this slide is saying, transitioned into being value destructive. So in other words, every dollar, you don't get a dollar back if you spend a dollar on mineral exploration. It's because the earth is finite, the targets are progressively more difficult, and the technology and knowledge that we're trying to accumulate to address that isn't keeping up with the depletion of resources. So there's going to be a challenge in relying on new discoveries going forward. And then there are also people who say, well, that's fine, we can just recycle. But, we need to be more responsible and recycle. Sorry, I've gone too far there. And again, this is a graph from Elshkaki et al. looking at different scenarios in terms of demand up in here, and the dotted lines down in here are their estimated contribution from recycling. And I think you can see that there's quite a significant gap between the potential contribution from recycling and the actual supply required to keep the world going. Some of you might wonder why these graphs, I'll show these different letters or different colors. You know, this one SF, which stands for security first, and market world, um, and so on. And so I thought I'd just put up, it's quite relevant in the current time, what these different things mean. So the SF is security foremost, and what that means is that the world is becoming more closed. Trade wars are starting. Major economies are declining to fund the WHO and so on. And there's market world, which is one where functions are taken over to a greater and greater extent by private enterprise, and towards resilience, which is sort of a happy medium. And then the equitability world, which is one where a conscious effort is made to supply minerals to the greatest extent possible to those that need it most in the developing world, which would equate to a very strong increase in demand, whereas the security foremost world leads to the weakest increase in demand. And I just put that up there because it seems to be more and more that we're moving further towards security foremost rather than some of these more optimistic scenarios, unfortunately. So that's really the picture in future future mineral supply. And in previous talks, I've really focused on this aspect, which is supply challenges. You know, when you look at these complex ore bodies and say, you know, what are the things that are stopping, that are stopping, you know, in the case of copper, the 1 billion tons of undeveloped copper metal that can't be put into, or is currently hadn't been put into production. And it's things like technical challenges, and low grade, and political, social, environmental barriers. And last May, when I gave this talk, I spent most of the talk focusing on that. And this is just a diagram from a paper that Eleanor Lebanon and Company produced earlier on this year, trying to sort of summarize that in abstract form, where we're looking at source risk, where we're saying the undeveloped ore bodies are sitting over here in the source, and they have to make it through this complex interplay of social, environment, and governance challenges that are interconnected and often act in concert before they can reach the supply side of things. And having given that talk before, I'm not going to do that again. What I now want to focus on instead is is some of the research that we're carrying out to address the challenge that arises from that. So really, what I want to do for most of the rest of the talk now is just look at some of the transdisciplinary research that we're carrying out aimed at trying to enable future mineral supply. And I've got a whole lot of different topics here and some examples under it. I guess the first thing I want to say is that it's not all the work that's taken place under the Complex Orebodies Program. We're you know, two and a quarter years into the program now, but I've tried to cover a lot of the projects. And if you've been involved in work on complex ore bodies that didn't appear in this talk, my apologies. It's not because it wasn't important. It's just you know, time constraints. So let's first look at you know, mapping the technical, social, environmental governance challenges to future mineral supply, and that really relates back to some of the things I was just talking about. And what I'm going to try to do with each of these is to show some of the people that have been involved, some of the outputs, yeah, just give an overview of some of the things we've been doing. So we can see in the background here a map derived from the S&P Market Intelligence database showing the distribution of copper deposits. And this is something I'm not going to labor because I showed it in the last time I gave this presentation, where we've looked at a range of risks across the top here, the top 40 deposits, color coded by risk over here. And what we can see is that for a lot of these deposits, whether it's copper, gold, iron, lead, zinc, nickel, most of the top 40 undeveloped deposits show a range of these risks that are acting in concert to make it difficult to put these ore bodies into production. So some of the people involved in that work, Glenn Corder, Deanna, John Owen, Camilla Svobodova, Martin Stringer, of course, Eleanor Leb has been the postdoc, working really 100% on this project. And This is one of the papers that's come out of this work, in addition to the paper we published earlier in 2019. But it's really been we're continuing to develop new avenues to work on this. We've also been working with Laura Saunter from Earth Sciences, and she's been looking in particular at renewable and non-renewable styles of resources and their distribution in relation to protected areas, key biodiversity areas, and the last of the wild type regions, and coming up with the conclusion that actually that some of the new renewable resources, if anything, are going to be more challenging to areas of biodiversity than the traditional commodities. And we're also collaborating with Shabir Ahmad, formerly from the Business School, now with the Institute for Social Science Research, and John Steen, who's also formerly from the Business School, now at UBC at the Norm Keevil Institute for Mining Engineering, working together to, I guess, bring more of a business economics focus to a similar set of problems. So we've devoted quite a lot of effort to understanding these future challenges to mineral supply, because it's a very important part of identifying and continuing to reprioritize the areas of research focus. Another extremely important and sort of fundamental area is community and social performance, and that's really been led by Deanna Kemp, John Owen, and Nick Bainton. These slides and quite a few of the other slides that I'm going to go through are taken from a November 2019 meeting that we had, giving an overview of some of the various people giving an overview of some of the work they've been doing on the Complex Orebodies project. So some of the work involved that the Center for Social Responsibility in Mining has been doing was, I think, a really fundamental study of community and social performance for companies, and also a benchmarking of social performance by a broader range of companies, and that's the component that was supported by the Complex Orebodies program, to really provide, I think, a baseline of performance for improvement of I guess the social performance of companies, which I think is going to be fundamental to earning the ability to be able to access production from some of the undeveloped ore bodies. And that work continued with a different sponsor in 2019, working close to home, but I guess continued on with the strongly applied industry partnership focus of the work that we're carrying out. Also, for the last couple of years, Nick Bainton, but others as well, have been leading work on Freda River in collaboration with PANOST, trying to understand a range of different community-related challenges and to equip them to maximize their community and social performance. And this is Deanna's slide, one of her sort of summary slides, saying, well, why is any of this important? And I agree 100% with everything she said here, and that is that the social aspects of resource extraction are becoming increasingly important. In fact, they're absolutely vital to improving our performance, gaining access to and making sure that we transfer economic and social benefits to communities around ore bodies, and making sure that mining companies have internal capabilities to make those improvements, and so it's really a fundamental part of our program going forward. Sort of as an add-on to that, one of the things that we've done a little bit of work on, and this is one where I've left out some earlier work by Malcolm Powell and Junyu Wang, but One of the things, obviously, that the JKMRC has been involved in for a long time is trying to model things, and to think about those models. And so this is an example of where Brunhilde Verrier, who was at Center for Social Responsibility in Mining for a year or so, came across and worked with us at the JKMRC with Mohsen Yahya and Gordon Forbes and Carl Smith from the business school, who's a specialist in dynamic modeling or system dynamics, to try to start to actually build a picture of the feedback loops between the parts of mining projects that we never defined. So, the parts of the mining projects that are outside the traditional NPV model, that relate to environmental performance, social performance, community support, which are obviously very hard to quantify, but I guess we would maintain they're not impossible to quantify. So one of the outcomes from that was as a demonstration of a whole series of things we'd like to do, is this Cyanide Socio-Technical Learning Lab, where basically, I'm just going to go ahead to the little diagram. So basically, what we tried to do was to model the system around the use of cyanide in a gold leaching operation, and to think about how those different areas, the environment, community health and safety, public support, tailings, risks, interact. And so again, there's a dashboard that was developed. I didn't talk too much about that because I'm going to go now go and look at it. Basically, a simulation pattern where you can look at outcomes in terms of tailings volumes produced, cyanide concentration in the environment, and sort of relative measures of community health, community trust, public trust, and vary a whole series of attributes in relation to the company's practices. So, when you look at operations, the characteristics of the leaching solutions and the conditions of the infrastructure and so on, but also the performance in terms of communication with and perceptions from the community. And when you vary those, you get varying outcomes. And the aim of all this is to be able to ultimately to be able to calibrate this to real operations, and to use it to understand how, to me, the real positive outcome of something like this would be to take two projects that have exactly the same, or two project alternatives that have exactly the same NPV, and choose between them on the basis of the fact that one has a far better outcome and a far lower risk of damage to the community and the surrounding environment, so that we can include that information in our decision making to a greater extent than we do now. So that's another example. Just go back here. Of course, another area of research that we've been carrying out from the start of this program is aimed at improving, really the in situ recovery. In some ways, obviously, is the holy grail, particularly for giant low-grade ore bodies. Because I'm sure most of you have heard people talking about the fact that one of our big challenges is, as we go to lower and lower grade ore bodies, we're producing more and more waste, more and more tailings, increasing risk around those tailings and chemical contamination around the waste at exactly the time when the community is the least willing to accept those sorts of risks. And so the appeal of being able to safely and cleanly recover metals in situ without having a mine, a tailings dam, or a waste dump is very appealing. And really, the UQ has a whole range of skills that speak to that, but also a whole range of projects that go across the I guess the whole gamut of fields that you require, in which you require knowledge in order to accomplish that work. And I'm not going to talk about any of these because the work that we've been focusing on has been in collaboration with the School of Chemistry and Molecular Bioscience in the area of novel lixiviant systems. And Alice, if you're listening, there are no words on this slide because I'm not exactly sure which parts of it I'm allowed to talk about and not to talk about. But what I can say is that we're well advanced on a patent for a very novel approach that appears to have a lot of advantages over existing means to leach copper and other metals from from low-grade ore deposits. And I think it involves those little beige-colored greeblies. And that's all I'm going to say on that. But what I am going to say is that there's a team of people working across their sciences, School of Chemistry and Molecular Bioscience, and the SMI, who have, who understand and are making strong progress in this area. Of course, actually, I'll come back to that. I know that I've actually heard, I think it was Tim Napier-Munn, I listened to one of his talks that was recorded on YouTube, where he said, the death of economies of scale has been announced multiple times and has never seemed to come about. So perhaps it's premature to say that we need to replace or enhance or eliminate large tonnage mega projects, but certainly one aspect of the work that we're carrying out is to try to develop an alternate approach where the decreases in cost are accomplished by improved understanding of variability that leads to more nimble and flexible processing that allows us to get away from the need to have enormous tonnage mega projects in order to accomplish the mineral production we need. So we have a range of different projects in that area that involve a number of different people. So there's a whole I guess range of work around understanding of variability where where we're using drilling information and other information, as well as modern I guess modern examples of core sensing and metallurgical testing in order to make far higher resolution predictions of behavior using logging data. And there's a whole range of different things that you can do in order to, and a whole new and growing range of high resolution tools that can allow us to come up with a much better picture of variability to feed into planning and to allow us to carry out flexible processing. And I guess we also, in addition to this general work that's involved people like Kate Tungplan, Kathy Evans, Nathan Fox, we also have a PhD study working on the La Fortuna porphyry copper gold deposit as part of the Nuevo Union project, where we're doing precisely that. We're using the whole range of geoscientific information available, combining that with metallurgical sampling in order to develop the best possible spatial picture and prediction of metallurgical characteristics. And we're also working with a Queensland-based really game developer, but I guess a group that has developed a very efficient way to visualize mega data sets, in enormous, hundreds of terabyte type data sets, which a lot of the traditional modeling softwares have trouble with. And we're in the final stages of switching to a hologram table that will allow us to visualize and manipulate that data. And allied to that, in an effort led by Mohsen Yahya, we're working towards, don't have yet, but working towards allying that with the development of a small scale flexible lab that will allow us to test that flexibility on the fly remotely in a way that could be a very powerful demonstrator to larger operations. So moving on now to some other aspects. So one of the outgrowths, I guess, of developing the Complex Orebodies database was the identification, I think originally by Anna Littleboy, but also I think John Owen, that there's a real potential to use that database for other areas, not just for mines that are not yet in production, but to try to understand some issues around closure. And so Kamila Svobodova has been working on that for the last little while, unfortunately leaving us later this year. But this group has been, has been extremely productive in terms of taking advantage of the existence of this database and considering a whole series of very important industry issues and I guess adding to the body of understanding in those areas. And I don't want to say that this work, because it isn't an outgrowth I guess, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that a very exciting development that is linked in at least a small way to some of this work is the successful initiation of CRC time, which is really going to, I think, allow the SMI under the banner of the CRC time to take this closure work forward in a much more fulsome way. Some of the other developments that we've been working on, one of the more exciting recent ones is I guess the renewed focus by governments around the world on critical metals. And as part of that, we've initiated a large project with the Queensland government on extraction of rare earth elements. And their premise was that for exploration and development, unlike a lot of other commodities, the industry actually has a very poor knowledge of alternatives for extraction of rare earths from different mineralization types. And so there was a real opportunity to look at different alternatives and to develop new technologies for novel extraction of rare earths. So this is a work that's involving earth sciences, the Hydromet group from chemical engineering, Center for Mineland Rehabilitation, and the BRC. The BRC, really, our role there is to compile and characterize some of the known deposits in Queensland. The work's supported by the Queensland government, and then James Vaughan and members of his team are going to be working on novel hydromet approaches to extraction of rare earth elements, and they're well placed to do that, having been involved in working on Olympic Dam for the past several years, which is perhaps not with a rare earth focus, but a lot of similarities in terms of the mineralization and some real synergies there. As well, the phytomining team with Peter Erskine and Anthony Van der Ent and Philip Nkrumah are going to be involved. Both Philip's working on ore from Dugald River, but we're also looking at a whole range of different deposit types. And one of my favorite photos from Anthony is this photo of a leaf from the synchrotron showing lanthanum and cerium concentrations in fern pinnules, showing this variation in concentration, but also showing that we can actually measure the accumulation of these rare earth elements inside these inside leaves being extracted from the materials they're growing in. And then Gordon Sutherman and Emma Gagan from Earth Sciences are working on bioextraction of rare earth elements. I think this is actually, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this is a gold particle showing that the little connections that have biologically grown to that gold particle in a way that we really are still endeavoring to understand. So that's another important and exciting project that we're working on. Another one of the key challenges, I guess, in terms of accessing undeveloped ore bodies is competition for water, and really ground zero for some of that is Chile. So last year we initiated a project looking at regional water supplies in mining regions in northern Chile, and that's work that's being carried out in collaboration between SWMI and SMI's Chile, with a sponsor who I'm not allowed, I don't think I'm allowed to name them yet. So, but we're at the final stages of a quite a large group agreement with an external group, as well as support from Corfo in Chile. Neil McIntyre, Liliana, Doug Aitken, and Claire Cote are, I think, all involved in that project. I'm not going to speak in any detail to this slide, other than to say it's really using quantitative, spatial, and other data in order to optimize water transmission routes. And if you think that there is a problem that needs to be addressed there, what I thought I'd include as well is a slide from Charlie Sartain's talk on the Complex Orebodies Program that he gave at the Brisbane Mining Club last week, where in his role as a board member of Goldcorp and then of Newmont Goldcorp, he witnessed a process where there was a situation in northern Chile at one point where Teck was developing the La Fortuna deposit, where they had their own port, their desal plant, their energy source, their water pumping system, their own concentrator plant, their pit, their tailings, and that that La Fortuna was I think Goldcorp, and then Teck at the same time had Relincho, which had its own pit, concentrator, tailings, water pumping system, energy, port, and desal plant, and the decision was made to combine those two projects into the Nuevo Unión project, which resulted in an enormous saving, a sequencing of production, in improvements in, I guess, community acceptance of the project, and you know, a very strongly positive outcome relating to, I think, in a major part to more efficient transmission of water. So that's an example of some of the work that we're doing in the water space. Another important factor that we identified early on as enabling future mineral supply is removal of contamination from the mining value chain. I think it's fair to say that one of the big challenges, or one of the big, I guess, barriers to bringing some projects into production is the fact that that communities are unwilling to accept the level of contamination that is going to come from those projects. So one example of that is in the arsenic space. So this is a diagram from Teck, actually, where they're looking at these blue lines, or sorry, the red lines here are, we're looking at a range of different deposits that aren't named, they're just numbered, and the percentage of arsenic in their concentrates. And what we're seeing in red here is the percentage of arsenic as of 2010, and in blue is the percentage of arsenic as of 2016. So there's a trend that as we go on and find, for example, in the copper space, copper ore bodies that are covered by lithocaps, where we're seeing the upper reaches of those copper ore bodies that tend to have a high sulfidation component and are therefore more arsenic rich. What we're seeing is that new resources are becoming more arsenic rich at exactly the same time. There's less interest in transporting arsenic around the world, less interest from communities in seeing arsenic enter their ecosystems, less interest from smelters in accepting arsenic-bearing ores, and so we need methodologies to deal with that arsenic. And there are a whole series of methodologies. So it's a little diagram here, shows, you know, you've mined, ground up, you floated off an arsenic-bearing concentrate, and there are existing technologies. Codelco has a roaster plant and related approaches to remove arsenic from their final products. Core Resources has been marketing the Tawong process, a hydromet approach. Teck and Codelco also have hydromet approaches to the removal of arsenic from concentrates. But one area that we've been working on is, well, instead of taking your whole concentrate that is evenly distributed with a slightly lower level of arsenic, why not float off a very arsenic rich concentrate, and then deal with it with, say, a hydromet approach at a smaller volume than you would otherwise have to. So these are a couple of slides taken from the talk on that from November. The people involved in this have been Lisa Forbes and Susanna Brito Abreu. You know, just a couple of points here that I just made, that, you know, arsenic minerals are generally difficult to separate. They have large penalties, and the situation in terms of acceptance of levels of arsenic all around is becoming more difficult, not less difficult. But there are approaches. And this is taken from Maida Tayabi-Karami's thesis, but has been subsequently, you know, that we're continuing to work on it, using variations, using electrochemical controls, variations in flotation chemistry, to selectively float arsenic-rich concentrates to accomplish the production of an arsenic-rich concentrate that I just talked about. So that's one example of contamination-related research that we're doing. We're also doing work, again, with the Department of Natural Resources in mines on unlocking value and dealing with contamination associated with mine waste. So it's an example here from Wolfram Camp, where we've got a group of people. Mansour Adraki is leading that group, but you know, a whole range of other students and postdocs as well. I won't list them all, but you know, I can see them there: Artem Golev, Zhengdong Han, Amelia Corso, and Mehdi Azadi, and in addition to that, we also have work that's being carried out in collaboration with companies. Here's one from Tasmania, where we're looking at recovery of cobalt from the Savage River old mine tailings. And we've just actually finalized another project with, initiated another project with the Department of Natural Resources and Mines, which is really the second phase of work on extraction of characterization, extraction of new economy minerals from Queensland mine wastes. So that's going to involve examination of mine wastes, looking at you know, new technologies for defining those metal contents in waste zones, and also novel processing options. And that's really involving all the people I've shown here, led by Anita Prabhakar-Fox, but you know, a collaborative effort also across CMLR and other groups. And last but certainly not least, there's a whole range of projects around the more traditional focus, or at least partly more traditional focus, of trying to produce metals using less energy, and importantly, leaving safer tailings. So reducing energy consumption, but also producing less of an environmental footprint, and that really covers two different areas, both of which are led by Kim Runge, the group leader for the separation group. So first, we've got coarse particle flotation, where basically it's you know, this, as it says here, it's a well-known problem in mineral flotation, that you know, the finer you grind ores, the easier it is to float them, but the more that increases the difficulty to remove water from them afterwards, and so a lot of the work in this area is around trying to find ways to efficiently recover most of the metal whilst leaving it at a coarser grain size, thereby using less energy and making it easier to store the tailings. And yeah, so some of the benefits are shown here, you know, increasing plant throughput, energy savings, dewatering performance, reduced acid mine drainage risk, and so on. So this is a key area for us. It's work that's being carried out in collaboration. You know, we're finalizing, I guess, the full consortium in this area, but it involves all these groups below: Newmont, Newcrest, Anglo areas, and in addition to Lisa Forbes, Conroy Demir is doing work on this, has recently come back, just escaped in time before the borders closed from the Cadia project in New South Wales. And in addition to that, we're also doing work led by Frank Shee, Christian Antonio, but also Daniel Lay as a student in high voltage pulse research. And it's basically pulses of energy that go into rocks and selectively soften rocks that contain conductive minerals in the right sort of geometry to allow the growth of cracks associated with that application of a high voltage pulse. And this is research we've been doing for a long time, and is really now finally bearing fruit. It's again a collaborative project between the Complex Orebodies Program, Newmont Goldcorp, and Newcrest, and this approach actually won the 2017 SEEK medal and was identified as a potential game changer, and really has a lot of potential in the area of waste rejection, but also selective processing and ore upgrades. And we're really focused now on taking the conceptual work and turning it into a demonstration of how something like this might work at industrial scale. So that's really, I guess, a quick overview of some of the areas of research that are being carried out as part of the Complex Orebodies Program. The final thing I want to talk about is just a little bit on some of the impacts and just a bit of background on the program. So I guess the first thing to say is that the program commenced in 2018 and involved basically $5 million of strategic funding over 5 years from the university. So, roughly $1 million a year. And the understanding was that this strategic funding was to be matched by a larger amount of industry funding, and I'll come back to that in a second. So we're 2.25 years into that program. As of the end of last year, we had about 59 UQ researchers participating from a whole range of different groups. So a very large group of researchers from within and outside the SMI. And one of the aims of these strategic programs was to build cross-disciplinary research programs, not to just fund work that goes on in a single group. So I think we've been pretty successful in assembling a large group of diverse researchers to address important problems. In terms of external funding targets, as of the end of 2019, we were, our target was to have reached $1.5 million external funding by the end of 2019, with a 5-year target of having brought in $7.5 million of funding by the end of the 5 years at the end of 2022. And that target, I'm happy to say, has now not with 100% certainty, but with very confident certainty, largely been met with the commitments to ongoing projects that we've received to date. And the good thing about that, from my standpoint, is that one of the things that's been most fruitful in this project, or that's been, I guess, has been the most pleasing, is that some of our biggest successes have been in the area where we've actually invested a relatively small amount of money in a very good idea to take it up to the stage where it could be made clear to a potential external sponsor. And there's been 3 or 4 projects along those lines, really covering the technical, social, and environmental areas where relatively small investment in proof of concept type research from the Complex Orebodies Program has allowed the initiation of a much larger program, where the incoming sponsor has more or less said, well, actually, we want to sponsor this program because we think it's one that is going to be of great benefit to us, not because you're co-investing. And so we're now in a situation where we can actually seed fund more proof of concept type studies than we thought might have been the case at this stage. So that's been very positive. Currently, in terms of what's running, about 20 projects involving 14 different UQ schools and centers. So it really is, you know, a cross-cutting program. In the current collaboration, 90% of the projects are cross-cutting within the SMI. In other words, they involve more than one group within the SMI, and 55% of them involve cross-cutting collaboration within and outside the SMI, and 85% of the projects involve collaboration with an external partner. In other words, they're outward facing. They're not just work that we're doing, you know, sort of in our own bubble. Moving on, we've got about 23 external funding partners from industry and government, so quite a large number of external groups that are participating in the program. And that journal publications number is as of late 2019, so that number will have gone up, and my apologies for not updating it, but we've continued to produce additional or to publish additional publications since then. The program to date has provided funding to 8 HDR students, 7 postdoctoral research fellows. In the first year of operation, we organized 1 international conference, and we considered whether we were going to have the second, that was an AusIMM Complex Orebodies conference. The next one would have been due would have been due this year, and I thought long and hard, you know, will we push, because we would have had to push for that in 2019. Will we push to run another Complex Orebodies conference in 2020? And we decided to prioritize progress on the research projects instead. I'm very glad we did, because we'd be in the middle of canceling it and cursing the fact that we spent so much time on it, because I think most conferences are being canceled for the remainder of 2020. And also, to date, 2 patent applications have been filed as a result of the work. So overall, the project has, you know, I feel has been very successful. We've managed to build the sort of cross-cutting programs that we envisaged at the start of the program, and we've also managed to attract the sort of industry participation and industry relevance that we'd hoped for when this whole initiative was being formulated. So that was really all I wanted to say. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. Thanks very much for your attention, and yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Rick. That was a really comprehensive overview of the work that's going on in the Complex Orebodies program. We have got time for some questions. I have put out a message just to say, if you do have any questions, please type them in the question and answer box for Rick, and we'll do our best to answer those for you. It seems to be quite quiet on the question front there, Rick. So if you had anything else you wanted to add, if not, I've got a small plug for the next week's talk, which in some ways feeds on. We have got some questions coming in now. Rick, I don't know whether you can see that, if you want to read that out, or I can read it out. It's coming from Robert Allen with more of a specific question regarding the arsenic-bearing ores and the hydromet work that's being planned. Is there any plan to use autoclave leaching techniques?
I guess what I would say is that our approach to this part of the problem has been fairly niche. So in other words, we're not trying to go head to head with the core resources or Teck and their Cecil approach, or Ecometales in terms of approaches to extraction of arsenic from concentrates. The area that we're focusing on, and has been a focus of research at the SMI for a while, is separation of a high arsenic concentrate that can be dealt with in whatever niche way you prefer, because our experience has been that every company or a lot of companies out there feel that they have a niche approach that will allow them to address extraction of arsenic from concentrates. But to focus on trying to maximize the possibility of being able to treat arsenic-bearing concentrates that would present a problem to smelters currently, and to separate those into nice, clean concentrates that will pay no penalties, and a dirty concentrate of a much smaller volume that could be dealt with. So we're not really looking at any sort of autoclave or further downstream technologies at all.
Thanks, Rick. Just one, there's kind of two related ones. There's one from Tim Napier-Munn just asking about having the resources to deliver all of the outcomes on such a wide range of projects, and possibly maybe this extends into one from here from Anita, which is just wondering what the intention is after COB funding finishes, and any opportunities to extend projects or replace with further strategic funding.
I know those are both very good questions, and I guess I would say that different projects are because of their level of external support, and because of their sort of relative readiness level, the answer is different. So there are some projects where I think we're doing very fundamental, very exciting work that could be used by someone. That might be used by someone in 10 years' time. And you know, for example, the bioengineering for in situ leach type applications, I think is, you know, has potential to be a fundamental game changer. And because of that, it is more challenging to get the right sort of visionary funding, particularly in you know, sort of recent environments. Whereas there are other projects where essentially Complex Orebodies, as I said, provided seed funding to a project which you know, which has then really caught fire in terms of its external funding. And so I sort of feel sometimes like it's been a process where you know, of going to different. It's 2020 is probably not a good year to talk about an analogy of striking matches and seeing if a fire starts, but that it's kind of a little bit like that, where you know, you go to something and say, okay, well, what if we get something going here? Is it going to build into something huge? And there have been some projects where we've done that, and then the further outgrowth hasn't happened, and then we've had to scratch our heads and say, well, how do we turn this into something that is potentially relevant to industry, because it doesn't seem to have caught people's imaginations. And then there are other ones, like the high voltage pulse and coarse particle flotation and the water work as well, where a relatively small amount of seed funding has just attracted you know, very strong external support. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's probably all I can say on that. That I don't expect all of the work that we're doing to result in a finalized sort of technologically ready product. The other thing to say is that we're very focused on trying to continue. There's no way this work's going to be finished at the end of 2022. So you know, we're almost now. I've been saying this for a little while, but we really do now have to transition into looking for a way to continue the strong work that's happening in this area, and it may just continue in the sense that a lot of the collaborations that have arisen as part of this work will actually stand the test of time and go forward as individual projects rather than being under one banner. I know that personally, what I've found is, you know, when I started this, I didn't actually know a lot of people in the university, and now I know and I'm working with people from all over the university. And when they, you know, and when people start working together and collaborating, as long as they aren't monsters, they realize that the other people they're working with aren't monsters either, and that they have a valid view, and there are synergies there that can allow the project to get taken forward. So.
Excellent. Well, I think we're kind of right on the dot in terms of timing. There were a few extra questions there, Rick. I don't know if you want to consider whether you want to answer those or whether we put those to the side and we'll come back to the relevant speakers. I think a lot of the questions that have come through on the chat, they're kind of been answered in a roundabout way by you previous questions, particularly relating to potential technology transfer and patenting opportunities. So I think that's probably good. Rick, I don't know whether there's one there from Paul on the question and answer. I don't know whether you wanted to take a quick shot of that.
I'm just going to have a look at. Please elaborate on your new economy metals, Ken. I'll catch you. I'll catch you later on that one. Yeah, we should catch up on those anyway. Okay, Paul, we've done Paul's. One of the key historic issues leading to a lack of implementation ESG measures has been the challenge of quantification of their value. Absolutely, and that's really why the work that we've been doing on that Cyanide Socio-Technical learning lab was one area of that. We're working on a project with Mehdi and Mansour as well around greenhouse gas accounting. All of those things are trying to at least semi-quantify some of those things that are not ever normally quantified in an NPV model, and I think it's very important to do that. So we're still at the early stages of doing that, but I think after struggling for a while with system dynamics, collaborating with Carl Smith at the business school, we've really found an approach that I think is going to bear fruit in that area.
Right. So I think pretty much now we should probably wrap it up, Rick. I don't know what you think.
I might just do I'll do one more, and then because we're only 1 minute over. So Alistair, how likely is the future patenting potential of new project tech to further bring benefits back to UQ? I think there's great potential for that. In 2 years we've done 2 patents. I think in both cases it'd be fair to say that we didn't start from zero on those projects, but we're continuing to develop approaches and I guess innovations that are potentially going to bring benefits back to UQ, in addition to the benefits of bringing in external research revenue that will allow us to continue to make advancements by that means. So I think that's the last one. So yeah, thanks.
Just on that, this is also back to industry as well. And I guess one thing I was curious about was whether or not we can make sure these approaches are available to all tiers of mining company and not all operations, but basically not just the majors, but also mid-tier.
Yeah. I think that really varies in some cases. Some of the things we're doing around, for example, quantification of things that aren't normally quantified, and also I guess the database work, that's not really under any confidentiality to any groups. And our aim there is to, and I think a lot of the not 100%, but quite a lot of the work being done by the Center for Social Responsibility in Mining is something where the aim is to try to make that available to as many external groups as possible. So I guess what we're doing as a mixture. Obviously, if people are sponsoring research, they're doing it because they have a perceived technical advantage from it. So there are some areas where if they sponsor that work, it's going to be it's going to be something where they see the benefit of it early on. But I don't think there's any work that we're doing where it's locked up so tight that we can't tell the world about it. In the fullness of time.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you again, Rick, for that really interesting talk. That's a really good overview for everybody online, and even people in your own groups who perhaps don't see the full breadth of the research going on.